In this screencast, we're going to talk about the simple tenses. Now, we know that grammatical definitions and terms might differ from linguistic terms. Oftentimes, in grammar books, we'll see that tense and aspect and time and modality can all be combined. But as linguists, we want to recognize the patterns that we see when we combine them, and that it's a systematic way to organize language and describe events in the real world using tense and aspect. When we talk about the simple tenses, I like to put these in scare quotes because they might seem simple because they are not marked with aspect, but they are very common, the use of these simple tenses, these aspect-less verb forms, and because they're used so often, we use them to express lots of different situations and events. So it can be not so simple to understand the use of these, especially for English language learners. As a reminder, we know that tense is a morphological marker on the verb, the lexical verb, and or it could be the special form of the verb for irregulars or the copula or auxiliaries. And tense is closer to time than aspect is, but it's not exactly tightly related, as we'll see. Now, where can tense be marked? We saw that verbs with aspect, the tense is marked on the auxiliary, but on the simple verbs, we see two patterns, really, and they're both on suffixes. For some, it's marked on only for third person singular. Tense is marked with a s on the verb, and for past tense, the d, ed, often spelled with an ed, occurs. But you can see some verbs like I, we, they, in the simple present, they'll have no marking on the verb. So let's start with the simple, the uses of the simple present. For this, we're going to look at our handout. It's important that you have your handout when you complete this, when we talk about the uses, so that you'll be prepared to do have your own understanding. I encourage you to stop the recording and construct your own sentence demonstrating the main use of these structures. Think about the forms and the ideas and synthesize the readings. And answer those summary questions as we think about this. Now, I listed some of the uses for the simple present, and I listed them in generally in order that you might see them. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and on the 6, 7, 8, 9, we have 9 uses of the simple present. And that's what I meant when I said the form might be simple, but the uses are complicated because we use the simple present in lots of different ways. The first one are just for habitual situations, something that you might do all the time, like I drive to work, things like that. We also use simple presents for just established facts and generic statements, states of being and possession. Now, as we continue, this might get a little more complicated. So the next one is that we use simple present in subordinate clauses of time or condition when the main clause contains a future situation. So we have a future situation like I will text you, and the subordinate clause as soon as she arrives. Now in this situation, she has not yet arrived. She's not there yet, but we English speakers use simple present in this construction. Interestingly, we also can use the simple present to describe future situations, such as we leave for vacation July 24th. This is simple present, even though it's a scheduled future event. That's again another example of how time and tense are not very tightly related. Moving down to the next one, we see this often in sports, like he shoots, he scores. Of course, that person can only say that he shoots and scores after the event has happened, but it makes it feel more exciting and close to the event if simple present is used. The next one is a little bit of a linguistic focus. It's a speech act where the act of saying something performs an act like we sincerely apologize, or I now pronounce you, husband and wife, or something like that. Summaries can also be used. This is sometimes called historical present when you say our story begins, even though you might be telling a story that happened a long time ago. Or you might, it can be any historical event. The last one is more common in spoken language, called foregrounding. We could say something like, I was sitting at the bus stop and I see this guy. When I switch over to simple present, I see this guy. It again brings that, even though it happened in the past, it now brings the listener and the speaker closer to the event by putting it in simple present. So ask yourself this question: if you were to form the simple present, what would that be? And let's think about the tense aspect modality in terms of actual, factual, close, remote, unfolding, completed. Which of these terms kind of match the simple present? So your answer should look something like the form of the simple present is either just a bare verb or a verb with the suffix s, or represented by the letter s. What are you noticing about the theme or the meaning of the simple present? Well, in terms of actual or factual, the simple present is used for actual events. I really, he really does own a silver car. And it usually describes actual events. And when we put it in the simple present, that's closer than if we put it in simple past, like he owned a silver car. And I did not choose either unfolding or complete because it's not clear that it's systematic with the simple present. It's probably not complete if we're using simple present, but it's probably not necessarily unfolding at that present moment. And this is just a general theme. We can see that that's just the prototypical relationship. Now let's move on to the simple past. The simple past only has 5 different uses in English that I've identified. Generally, we can use one of these. We use the simple past for single completed actions. She sneezed in my face. I wrecked my car. Something that is single and completed. But we also can use simple past when it's an extended situation that is now complete. For instance, I lived in Pittsburgh for 20 years. We can also use simple past for a series of regular events that occurred in the past, like I often missed the bus on Monday morning. We use the simple past when there is a conditional probability. For instance, if I did it, you would never know. That's a conditional with the if clause. And the fifth reason that we use simple past is for a pragmatic reason, to signal politeness. Sometimes students come up to me and say, I wanted to ask you a question. What they really mean is I want to ask you a question. It's in the present that they want to ask the question, but if you put it in simple past, it makes it a little bit more polite in our society. So there's the 5 reasons, 5 uses of the simple past in English. What do you take a moment to write the regular form, written form of this simple past tense, and consider the meaning. So the simple past can be made by adding the ed to the written form, or it might be an irregular verb. So what is some underlying meanings or themes? In terms of actual or factual, we use the simple past for actual events, and as we discussed in relationship to the simple present, simple past is more remote than the simple present, and it is often describing a complete event, not something that is unfolding or present or possibly still happening. Let's move on to the simple future, going back to our handout. I've listed 4 uses of the simple future. They might be a little bit difficult to tease apart, so I added some extra examples so that you could look at the form and also the meaning in the use. So we use the simple future for future predictions and future intentions. Those are kind of close. I would separate them a little bit in mostly just the activity or the ability of the control of the event. We also use this, and this is a slight difference, we use the simple future for a future certainty based on current conditions. For instance, Belinda will be 40 next year. Since we know she's 39 right now, we know that she'll be 40 next year, or Pauline's going to have a baby next month. As I said, I gave lots of examples on the handout so we can look at not just the use of it, but also the form. And I wanted to take a time now to look at example 4 and example 5. We see that in 4 we have a modal will, but in example 5 we have a phrasal modal, is going to, where all of that is the same as a one-word modal like will. Pauline will have a baby. I wanted to give those kinds of examples so that, because sometimes phrasal modals can trip people up on their analysis. This is also example 5 is also good because you can see that have, which can be an auxiliary and perfect aspect, can be used as a lexical verb, as the main verb. So that's something also to keep in mind. And then the last one is a spontaneous, we use the simple future for a spontaneous decision when a person has control, like I will get the phone or I won't get up. And notice I added the negation there just to give you another example. So what's the form of the future tense and what is the underlying theme? Take a moment to write those down. So every verb that is labeled with the grammarian term future will have a modal, like will or would or should. So it'll be a modal, then a verb. The other thing of interest is these will be non-factual events. They wouldn't have actually happened yet. The idea of close and remote depends on the modal, because if you say, I will see you tomorrow, that's a little closer than I would see you tomorrow. So it kind of varies inside of the modals that you choose. And there's not a reason to describe it as unfolding or complete. Please post, you can post questions or examples as you find them about the simple tenses.